The sound of a wrench hitting cold concrete echoed through the empty racing garage like a gunshot in a courtroom, and in that instant, the life of a man who had spent years quietly keeping legends alive came crashing down for something as simple as fixing a broken engine. The man standing under the flickering fluorescent lights was a single father who had learned to survive on grit, exhaustion, and an unshakable love for his child. His hands were still stained with oil, his shirt torn at the sleeve, his face marked by long nights and longer battles with life itself. He had done what he always did when he saw something dying that he could save: he fixed it. He didn't know it would cost him everything. And on the other side of the garage stood the woman who owned it all, the CEO of Virelli Motors, one of the most powerful racing empires in the world. She was young, sharp-eyed, and hardened by years of proving she belonged in a world that never expected her to lead it. To her, rules were survival. Control was everything. And mistakes were never forgiven. What she didn't know was that the man she was about to fire had built every championship-winning race car her company had ever produced. Before we continue this emotional journey, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of unseen heroes, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Everkind Stories. Your support helps bring stories like this to life. The garage that day was supposed to be sacred ground. It was where Virelli Motors tested prototypes worth millions, where engineers walked on eggshells around precision machines that could decide the fate of international championships. Every bolt, every screw, every line of code mattered. But something had gone wrong with the newest prototype, the Virelli X9, a machine expected to dominate the upcoming global racing season. The engine had failed during a controlled test, and panic had spread through the company like wildfire. Engineers were arguing. Managers were sweating. And the CEO had arrived personally, her presence turning chaos into tense silence. She did not tolerate failure, especially not now, when competitors were waiting for any sign of weakness. Then she saw him. He was not supposed to be there. Not in that section. Not anywhere near the prototype. He was just maintenance staff, a single father hired through a subcontracted cleaning and repair service, someone who usually worked late shifts fixing whatever minor damage the engineers ignored. But he had walked toward the broken engine like it was calling to him. While the engineers debated theories and data screens flashed red warnings, he had already knelt beside the machine. He listened to it. Not with instruments, but with instinct. He touched the metal casing like someone greeting an old friend. And then he began working. Within minutes, the tension in the room shifted. He had opened panels they were afraid to even unscrew. He adjusted components with careful precision, as though he could see inside the engine without looking at diagrams. And slowly, the machine began to respond. But brilliance is often mistaken for defiance by those who do not recognize it. When the CEO finally approached, her heels striking the floor with authority, she saw only a man breaking protocol, interfering with a multimillion-dollar asset, risking everything she had built. She did not see the history in his hands. She did not see the years he had spent in shadows, building the very foundation of her empire. Her decision was swift, sharp, and absolute. He was fired on the spot. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. The engineers avoided his eyes. The man stood slowly, not out of arrogance, but exhaustion. He looked at the engine one last time as if saying goodbye to something familiar, something he had once loved without permission. What the CEO did not realize in that moment was that she had just removed the only person in that building who truly understood what was wrong with her most important creation. The man walked out carrying nothing but his worn toolbox and the weight of survival. Outside, the city felt colder than usual. He thought of his young child waiting at home, of unpaid rent, of another job lost because he had done what came naturally. Fixing things others couldn't. Or wouldn't. He did not complain. He never did. Life had taught him that survival was not about fairness. It was about endurance. Years earlier, he had been one of Virelli Motors' hidden engineers. Not on paper. Not in recognition. He was part of a secret development team hired under strict confidentiality to design experimental race engines. His work had never been credited. His name never printed. He was one of the invisible minds behind every breakthrough that had made Virelli famous. But when his wife fell ill and the medical bills grew impossible, when promises from the company turned into silence, he left. Not out of anger, but necessity. He took his knowledge with him, buried it under survival jobs, and chose his child over his career. Still, he never stopped understanding machines. He never stopped hearing engines speak. Back at Virelli Motors, the CEO believed the problem had been handled. Protocol had been enforced. Order restored. But as the hours passed, the X9 prototype remained unstable. Engineers tried everything, but the engine refused to operate beyond basic ignition. Every test ended in failure. What should have been a breakthrough became a looming disaster. Sponsors began calling. Investors grew restless. The racing season was approaching, and Virelli's reputation was now at risk. The CEO, once confident in her decision, began to feel the first cracks of doubt. Not because she questioned authority, but because she could not understand why a simple maintenance worker had managed to stabilize the engine when her best engineers could not. Reluctantly, she reviewed the security footage. What she saw unsettled her in a way she did not expect. There was no recklessness in his movements. No ignorance. Only understanding. Deep, precise, instinctive understanding. He had not been guessing. He had been correcting something fundamental. And then she noticed something else. A sequence of adjustments he made before she stopped him. Adjustments that matched design patterns found only in confidential Virelli archives, designs she herself had only seen during executive briefings. Her confidence wavered for the first time in years. Meanwhile, the man returned to his small apartment, where his daughter greeted him with the kind of smile that made every hardship feel temporary. He did not tell her what happened. He never wanted her to carry the weight of his disappointments. Instead, he simply held her closer that night, pretending the world outside was kinder than it actually was. But the world does not stay silent for long when truth is buried. The next morning, Virelli Motors faced another failure. The X9 engine refused to respond completely. The company was now on the edge of a public collapse. The CEO stood alone in the testing chamber long after others had left, staring at the machine that was supposed to define her legacy. And for the first time, she made a decision not based on pride, but uncertainty. She ordered the man to be found. It took hours. By the time he was brought back, he looked tired, not surprised. He had expected nothing less from a world that only remembered him when it was desperate. The garage was quiet again, but this time the silence was different. He stood before the broken engine, not as a worker, not as someone fired, but as the only person who had ever truly understood it. What followed was not dramatic at first. He did not rush. He did not speak much. He simply worked. Carefully. Patiently. As if returning to something unfinished. Every movement carried memory. Every adjustment carried history. And slowly, the engine began to breathe again. Systems stabilized. Power levels balanced. The machine that had refused everyone else finally responded to the man who had once helped design its ancestors. The CEO watched in silence as data screens shifted from red to green. For the first time in her life, she did not feel in control. She felt something far more uncomfortable. She felt the weight of realization. This was not just a worker she had dismissed. This was the invisible architect of her success. When the truth finally reached her. Through old internal records she forced herself to reopen, the impact was devastating. The man she had fired was listed in forgotten files as a core designer of Pirelli's most successful race engines. His contributions had been erased after he left the company quietly years ago. Not because he failed, but because no one thought someone like him mattered enough to keep. The CEO stood in the same garage where she had once dismissed him and felt something she had never allowed herself to feel before. Regret. She found him later that evening outside the facility, preparing to leave again. This time, she did not speak with authority. She spoke with hesitation. With humility she was not used to. She acknowledged what she had done. She admitted she was wrong. Not just about the engine, but about him. He did not react immediately. People like him had learned not to trust apologies that came too late. He looked at her quietly, not with anger, but with exhaustion. Years of being unseen do not vanish in a moment of recognition. But then he looked at his daughter, who had been waiting nearby, watching silently. And something softened in him. Because sometimes forgiveness is not about the past. It is about the future someone might still have. He agreed to return. Not as someone beneath the system. Not as a hidden contributor. But as a respected engineer with full recognition. What followed changed Pirelli Motors forever. The X9 went on to become the most successful race car in the company's history. Championships were won. Records were broken. But more importantly, the company began to change from within. People who were once invisible were finally seen. Voices once ignored were finally heard. And the CEO, once defined by control, began to understand leadership in a new way. One built not on authority alone, but on respect. And at the center of it all was a single father who had never stopped being an engineer, even when the world refused to call him one. In the end, he did not just fix an engine. He rebuilt an entire empire's understanding of value, dignity, and second chances. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to engage with this video. Your support helps bring more emotional, inspiring stories like this to life, stories that remind us that the people we overlook are often the ones holding everything together. And sometimes, the greatest minds are not lost. They are simply waiting to be seen.
If you believe in kindness, kindly please subscribe my channel and press the bell icon to get all the notifications. If you like this story, so write a comment below and share with this your friends. Thank you so much for watching.